over to you. And, well, the question of genocide.
Yeah, so quite extraordinary event in the sense that South Africa has now invoked the Genocide Convention at the ICJ, and the hearings will be held on the case against Israel on the 11th and 12th of January 2024. I was looking for a review of the actual 84-page report by South Africa, and I recommend people go to John J. Mearsheimer's Substack to read what he says. So it's an 84-page application that South Africa filed with the International Court of Justice on the 29th of December 2023, accusing Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. It maintains that Israel's actions since the war that began on 7th of October are intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group in the Gaza Strip. That charge fits clearly under the definition of genocide in the Geneva Convention, to which Israel is a signatory. He then goes on to say, apologies for the dog barking, my neighbors suddenly decided to go on the roof. The application provides a substantial body of evidence showing that Israeli leaders have genocidal intent towards the Palestinians. Indeed, the comments of Israeli leaders, all scrupulously documented, are shocking. One is reminded of how the Nazis talked about dealing with Jews when reading how Israelis in positions of the highest responsibility talk about dealing with the Palestinians. In essence, the document argues that Israel's actions in Gaza, combined with its...
I'll read the rest of that, Vanessa. Hold on. So it says, in essence, the document argues that Israel's actions in Gaza, combined with its leaders' statements of intent, make it clear that Israeli policy is calculated to bring about the physical destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. Have you muted yourself?
Sorry about this. If we move on to the next slide, then he basically says the document goes to considerable lengths to put the Gaza war in a broader historical context, making it clear that Israel has treated the Palestinians in Gaza like caged animals for many years. It quotes from numerous UN reports detailing Israel's cruel treatment of the Palestinians. In short, the application makes clear that what the Israelis have done in Gaza since the 7th of October is a more extreme version of what they were doing well before October the 7th. And of course, what is Israel's reaction to this? They claim that it's blood libel. Israel slams South Africa for filing the ICJ genocide motion over Gaza. And in the text, what they actually say, South Africa's claim has no factual and judicial basis and is a despicable and cheap exploitation of the court. The Israeli Foreign Ministry said in a statement, South Africa is collaborating with a terror group that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. Fairly typical projection there. And going on to the White House, which claims it sees no evidence of acts of genocide. Genocide is one of the most heinous atrocities that any individual can commit. Those are allegations that should not be made lightly. We are not seeing any acts that constitute genocide, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said during a news briefing in response to a question about South Africa's decision. And then if we can just play a video from the infamous John Kirby, who basically in about 8 seconds proves himself also to be a genocide denier, if we can play that.
South Africa's filed this 84-page lawsuit against Israel, accusing them of genocide. Israel says that this is blood libel. Does Washington agree? And where does this put Washington and Pretoria?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
Brian.
What's interesting is that Israel has chosen a British legal expert to represent it in the International Court of Justice genocide case. Professor Malcolm Shaw will have to argue that Israel is in fact complying with international law and that extreme statements from Israeli leaders don't reflect official policy in Gaza. Now, of course, the hardest thing usually to prove over a case of genocide is that of intent. And that appears to be very clearly proven with the statements that are coming from the Israeli leadership. So Shaw also teaches a course at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem as a guest lecturer every year. In the first stage of the case, Shaw will have to contend with South Africa's request for an injunction ordering Israel to stop the war in the Gaza Strips on the grounds that it constitutes genocide. Through such an order could theoretically be enforced by the UN Security Council through sanctions. Of course, America would likely veto such a move. Nevertheless, an injunction could result in Israel and Israeli companies being ostracized and subject to sanctions imposed by individual countries or blocs. So we're at an interesting stage at the moment, and a fairly pivotal one in what's going on, not only in Israel and Palestine, but in the region. Palestine's top diplomat to the UK, the head of the Palestinian mission, Hossam Zomlot, has also warned the UK against Britain's complicity in Israeli ethnic cleansing after rumours that Tony Blair was going to be working on the displacement and the repatriation in other countries of the Palestinian refugees in Gaza.
Okay, thank you for that, Vanessa.